Pablo Gagoli. Pablo is the founder of Liberatum, and so if we're all here, it's thanks to Liberatum and to Swire Properties, and so we're very happy to be here to discuss the impact of technology on art and creativity. At least that's what we were asked by Pablo to do, and for that we have a brilliant panel here consisting of Grimesa Amoros. Grimesa is an artist who's using technology as really, I think, one of the main features in her art. She will, of course, tell us all about her art, and we really look forward to discussing it or everything about it. Then we have Isaac Julian, who is a great, great artist and who, in a way, is using already not so new technology, but still he's making movies, videos, and he has done many very successful films and stills. And I would just mention his last two, The 10,000 Wives, which was in 2010, and then he did Playtime, which is 2013. I had the great, great privilege of having a little role in it, together with Maggie Chung and James Franco. I never met them because the filming technology is such that you don't need to be there simultaneously. But and then we're very happy. We have the two artists in the middle, but very, very happy to have Hans-Ulrich Obrist, who is the Uber curator. He needs no introduction whatsoever. The first time I've ever seen a show done by him, he was 16 or 17 years old. He was, as a teenager, he was spending all his time going to visit great artists. And so he did a show of Gerhard Richter in Sils Maria in Switzerland, in the house of Nietzsche. And it was still to this day one of the most extraordinary exhibitions I've ever seen. And recently, amongst the hundreds of extraordinary exhibitions that he has curated, he, for the second time in his career, worked together with Gerhard Richter and put together the marvelous Richter show at the Baylor Foundation in Basel. Now, it is Hans Ulrich who introduced me to some new technologies, such as Instagram, such as other interesting social media. And so you have to have little names when you correspond in these devices. And so his name, you will not be surprised, is Hurricane Hurricane. So, which is a very fitting name for somebody who basically never sleeps. He's a bionic man, and I envy him for not needing any sleep, which sadly is definitely not my case. So now, Grimesa, I think we'll start with you. And why don't you tell us, first of all about you?
Hello. First, I want to say thank you very much for Liberatum for giving me the opportunity to be with wonderful, panelists, and for you that you have taken some of your precious time to come and hear all what we have to say. So thank you for that. And well, it's an interesting question. Where we start? I'm originally from Peru, and I came to New York when I was 20 years old, with 2 bags, and dreamed about living the bohemian life that we all see in the movies growing up in Peru, you see? So that's when I started in 1984, and it has been a very interesting path.
And tell us, because what is interesting, when you walk through Art Basel and you try and look at what is on view next door, you think, what is the impact of technology on what we see? And what we still look at is predominantly paint on canvas and sculptures. I would say, I don't know in percentage how to quantify it, but the vast majority still of what is on view is paint on canvas and sculpture. So how has technology influenced your own work?
Well, I think that from the start I was not really interested in making work that perhaps was going to be doing very well in the art markets. I want to start by saying that. And so I never felt that I wanted to make work and to be displayed in a home as basically as a trophy. And so I wanted to go out into other structures, in other spaces. I wanted really to communicate with the vast public in many different types of languages. And when I started with Light was couple of years ago, I had experience to experience the aurora borealis, or northern lights, for some of you that know it by that name. And it just made me say, wow, I couldn't sleep the whole night. And I said, if I could only share this experience with others, wouldn't it be amazing? So it took me a little while to try to transfer that experience from those moments until when I started using, the technology, of course. And first I started with theater lighting, and it made me realize that I didn't want to have a business in maintaining the pieces, because they get very hot, and then you have to constantly change the gels. But at that time, the LED world was quite, the budgets required to be quite expensive, so I had to wait a couple of years. And now, mainly what I do is I work with an engineer that they make what we call these DMX32s, and I could program regular LED lightings that, for example, architects or engineers will use on a regular buildings, the ones that you just see every day, basically. And the only difference is that I create a little brain that I'm able to manage them and do certain movements, what I would like them to do on that time.
So clearly technology does play an important role in your work and for your way of expressing yourself. What I would love to find out from Isaac, when you decided to become an artist, at which stage did you decide to really focus on basically the moving image and producing films and videos?
Well, I should say that I started life as a painter, but of course I thought that medium was far too old-fashioned, and I had to reflect somehow the contemporary experience. And so film became the medium, and I could say that perhaps one of the reasons why I'm talking here to you now is really because of the advent of new technology. It's because one of the reasons why I was able to make works in an art context was because of the projector, because of digital technology, projecting images in a particular way, suited or emulated film to a certain extent. And so it's the advent of new technologies that created the possibility for making works shown in a gallery context in a way that they weren't able to be shown, sort of, say, at the mid-80s. By the 90s, everything got transformed by the new technologies. And so in this sense, I would say that my work's completely connected to the advent and the march of how new technologies transformed art practices.
And with the moving image basically dominating our lives, because we spend our days looking at moving images on our devices, on our PCs, and in the cinema and so on, do you find the art world slightly contriving and limiting for a medium which is totally universal, and it is unusual for somebody who is really focusing on the cinematic aspect of his art to choose the art world as, in a way, house in which to show it?
No, that's absolutely true, and I think it's very ironic. You're absolutely right. There's a way in which I think, to a certain extent, art fairs are sort of response to the new digital revolution. I was talking about velocity to hands on the train from Heathrow Airport about a week ago on a Sunday night, and we were talking about you were talking about velocity, and I think there's a way in which velocity and speed is the thing that's making us all tired, making us get on aeroplanes, making us want to see art all over the world, and that has something to do with the way that technology has influenced the way that we're looking. But you're absolutely right. The art world is a place, nonetheless, where we're focusing on speed and technology. And but then we go to look at objects, because in a way, this is the dominant form, and so there's this very ironic position, that one casts oneself in making works. But I should just say, I guess my alibi around that is that one of the things around the new technologies is that it created a new aesthetic possibility, and it seemed to me that that aesthetic possibility or meditation was something that was very unique to the art audience. There was something in the art audience, there was a kind of sensitivity to these new developments of looking, especially in exhibition context, but maybe, the future could be more in the Instagram, where there's a possibility for appreciating art. And so I think that the art audience is less conservative than the film audience, put it that way, in terms of the possibilities for appreciating the possibilities for new expressions of art in the moving image.
And you said you started as a painter. Do you occasionally go back to painting or haven't done it for a while?
Well, I'm probably a bit, too many plane trips to paint, put it that way.
Yes. Now, Hans Ulrich, I've just heard before that you have written 280 books, which is remarkable. I do not know how many exhibitions you have mounted in your very active career so far, but I would love to know what is the impact of technology for you in conveying art and showing art, and because you are somebody who's interested in art in the widest sense of the word.
Yeah, and actually, Isaac, before I want to answer, I wanted to just say something came to my mind, talking about paintings and film and moving image is actually the wonderful Derek Jarman show you curated for the Serpentine. That brought it all together somehow, no? Because he, like you, did both, in a way. But to answer, actually, Simon's question, I think in a way, there are many parallel realities. And I think there's always, I mean, I have a few images here, so maybe we can look at them. In the early 90s, we started this show, Do It, with Boltanski and Lavier, and that was very much kind of triggered really by, I don't know how this works, by the fax, no? So it's a kind of an answer to the fax age, because artists could fax instructions, and then we would basically do an exhibition where the fax would, no, it doesn't seem to work.
I think I have to point it forward.
You see, we depend on technology.
Plan B.
Yeah, you see, so here are some of these instructions, Stephen Kaltenbach and so on. So basically, lots of instructions arrived by fax, and then obviously at a certain moment, the internet arrived, and this exhibition of instruction art had suddenly the possibility to actually give us a lot of feedback loops, because people could realize these pieces, with, you know, interpret them, it's like a musical score, and then email images back. Maybe we just have a one image. Yeah, here are some other choreographies. Maybe you should just put it on, you know, that it automatically moves, because this is not working. So maybe you can just manually advance, no? Yeah. So many of these different instructions. And in a way, for me, it took a long time to actually curate the sort of first exhibition on the internet. Obviously, Tim Berners-Lee invented in 1989 the World Wide Web. It initially came from this idea of inquire, so it had always research at its core. And it changed, of course, the way, as a curator, one would research, you know? And that's certainly the first fundamental change it cost, but I never really curated an exhibition online until only very recently. In a way, well, certainly it played a big role, and that's the first exhibition somehow where it directly connects to it, is the 89 Plus project, which Simon Casti and I started 2 years ago, where we want to make a choreography here in Cape Town of this new generation born in 89 and younger. So we actually look at the first generation of artists who grew up with the internet. We can just move on. You see many of these different workshops and projects in relation to 89 Plus, which you can also see on the website, on the 89 Plus website. So the idea is actually to make a cartography, you know, of this generation of artists who are the first generation who grew up with the internet. And obviously, technology plays a very big role in them. We see patterns emerge. We have more than 5,000 dossiers so far. We did the Serpentine Marathon as one of the first speaker gatherings, and already there we observed, fascinating actually, that poetry is somehow one of the key focus of this new generation of artists, that Twitter and technology produced a completely new form of poetry. For this very reason, the first exhibition actually, after all these workshops and, you know, panels, the first exhibition we organized was actually dedicated to poetry at the Luma Foundation with Maya Hoffman in Zurich, where we gathered a whole, basically, you know, number of these artists working with internet, with digital poetry, poetry in the digital age. We worked with Kenneth Goldsmith. More than 1,000 books came out of this process. For most of these poets, it's their first book ever published, so kind of beginnings. So that would be somehow a first sort of maybe evolutive exhibition. Residencies are also very important for 89 Plus. We think it's important in terms of technology to give artists access to technology. And there is a very interesting historical precedent which Billy Kluwer did in the 60s when Bell Laboratory was at its peak. He basically did experiments in art and technology, and he brought artists into the field of technology. For this reason, we felt it's interesting to do this now, and we started to work with different companies. There's the Google residency in Paris, for example, where artists of the 89 Plus generation, you know, can use these tools and actually spend a residency in the Google Institute. Another, if we advance a little bit here, it's still 89 plus. You see the exhibition also of Ed Atkins. That certainly has to do with technology, because here you have an artist who, like Isaac, works with moving image and technology, uses a lot of HD for his work. And you see here this incredible tension there is between materiality and technology, and that it's almost like an oxymoron which he works on. I wanted to end here with showing you a few things of my second online exhibition, which is the Instagram project, which Simon mentioned, which links us both, because we both are very passionate about Instagram. And that has to do also with what we might lose through technology. I think one of the things we should never forget is that technology opens all kinds of possibilities, but that we might lose things. And Edouard Glissant always said, through globalization, we might lose things. The homogenizing forces might make us lose languages. Susan Hiller made a whole movie about a film about all the languages we lose in this age of globalization. And for me, one of the most striking things, here you see Etel Adnan, the wonderful poet from Beirut, and she really was at the origin of this project, because I realized, sitting with her in a cafe, and she suddenly wrote a little poem on a paper handkerchief, what we are losing if we lose handwriting. And I thought we need to save handwriting. So I started a movement to protest against the disappearance of handwriting, and I post every day on Twitter and Instagram a handwritten sentence by an artist, by an architect, by a scientist, to basically celebrate the beauty of handwriting, and also to celebrate the fact that all of us in this room, none of us has the same handwriting. We all have a different handwriting, and that has to be celebrated every day. So it's an ongoing exhibition which has been going on now for 2 years, and I don't see an end in sight, because as long as handwriting isn't back, we will continue the protest, and at the end it might lead to a book.
Well, I must say, I follow with great pleasure your post-its that you put on Instagram every day with handwritings by great artists and thinkers and around the world. Now, do you think, Grimanesa, that the physical aspect of art that is being celebrated next door is something that is disappearing in the same way that Hans Ulrich is now single-handedly saving handwriting, that the physicality of art itself is become far less important, and you think the art lovers of tomorrow will not attach as much importance to the physicality of art?
I truly don't think that the physicality will disappear. I think that a lot of people are they are attached to objects, they want them. So I think that we might not be able to see it in the next 50 years. I feel that there's a tremendous sense of robotic, and that a lot of scientists are, romancing the idea with movements, and I think it's going to be incorporating into the human being to be part robotics. That is something that I'm very, very interested in. To the person, the human being, become an object of himself, of technology, and become an object itself. So I don't think that it's going to be disappearing. Now, for myself, I like to work with light because it's very ephemeral. And so you cannot catch the moment of the light because it changes every second. And at the same time, I use the physicality of certain materials that they are, common use for every day, to be able to transmit the light through it, right? So I don't, I see, for example, my daughter, she's 18, and she, of course, used the Instagram and all Facebook, but I see how much still she loves to go, for example, to the museums, and how she looks at old masters to appreciate composition and colors and so on. So it's a very big, I think we are at the beginning of it.
Yes, well, and Isaac, your films, you have a very special way of showing your movies. I've seen Playtime in a projection on 7 different screens, simultaneous screens, and I must say it is an extraordinary way of experiencing your films, because you cannot focus on one panel and on one screen at the same time, because you're immediately distracted by what's happening on another one, and you're in a way taking it all in simultaneously, and that adds to the experience. How do you try and bring physicality into your work, if it's at all a concern?
But I think in the sort of moving image works that I mean, for me, the whole idea of being able to have works or screens in a sculptural relation is to increase that physicality or sculptural aspect to the moving image. But of course, that can only exist if you film in a kind of sculptural way. And so I think the question of the moving image and the question of movement is very important. And one of the things that I want the new technologies to do in terms of how they've influenced my practice is that we are on Facebook, we're on our mobile phones, we're on these different screens all the time, and that question of different screens seeks into an artist's subjectivity, and I think that's how the question of multiple screens come into being in my own work. But I think the other question is of synchronicity, the fact that being able to synchronize the different images together, and in a sense that only comes about because of the algorithms in computer programs, that you can get this really very succinct synchronicity, and that increases the kind of pleasure aspect of looking at the image. But I guess the other aspect is the fact that, in a way, maybe it's also another representation of the fact that humans are becoming cyborgs. You know, we can't move very far without our mobile phones. We don't look really anymore without our mobile phones. And so technology becomes part of our expression. And in that sense, then, the artist makes works where parts of that kind of technological expression becomes imbued into the work, into how you make images. And so, in a sense, you know, it's very ironic. At the same time, I think there is a desire then for the arcane to return back to objects, you know, in relationship to the question of velocity and speed, that you want to get back to this other aspect of human expression in reaction to the way that we're all encompassed in new technologies today and how they affect how we look and feel.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting what you're pointing out there, because I do feel that while there is a lot of art being influenced by new technologies, at the same time there is, as you've said, a kind of back to basics movement as well. For instance, there is a stronger use of ceramics than in a long, long time. There is really a renewal, a renaissance in ceramic art, or artists working with glass, or artists working with textiles, and going back to, you know, techniques that have been used, you know, for centuries. And I'd be interested to hear from Hans Ulrich in terms of displaying art, displaying physical art. Do new technologies help you? And then a second point, does the fact that everybody comes now armed with their iPhones or Blackberries to see the exhibitions, do you like the fact that it helps divulging your activity instantaneously?
Yeah, I think the first point relates so directly to what Isaac told us, and I think in a way exhibitions are more important. Physical experience with exhibition is more important than ever in the age of the internet. And it's the same thing with music, where live concerts play a bigger role than ever before. I mean, more and more people want to see exhibitions, and I think, you know, to see one of Isaac's installation with all its complexity, multi-layeredness, and as you described, you know, non-linearity is something we could never experience on a screen at home. We just couldn't. It's something we can only experience by being embodied and being in the space, and so on. So I think, in a way, that makes the exhibition only more important, because it's actually, in a way, an experience we can never have, you know, in front of a screen alone. Now, the thing which I think is also important in relation to that is that there are more and more possibilities to program this experience, and that's something which I think where technology is important. I mean, already what Isaac described, what's happening in these multi-screen situations would not have been possible without digital technology, because it's such a complex kind of program where one thing starts and another thing, you know, continues, etc., etc. And then obviously, Margaret Mead once said the problem with exhibitions is, whilst it is this very, very liberal format, and that's a great thing, it gives us this freedom to come and go, and we can spend a minute or a year in an exhibition. So it's not like with a opera or with a theater where we have this prescribed temporality, which I think is the reason why so many filmmakers also want to come into the world of exhibitions. I mean, Agnes Varda, whom we brought into the world of exhibition, always told me how much more exciting she finds it than to go to film festivals where she can just screen a 90-minute film, and it's incredibly, incredibly formative that she can actually have that freedom, you know, to explore. So I think, in a way, this complexity and this freedom of the format of the exhibition is great. But Margaret Mead and Dorothea von Hantelmann in her new book, The Ritual of the Exhibition, describes it beautifully, says we can go beyond the idea of addressing mere visual phenomenon, and actually the exhibition can address all senses, no? Because if we look at old rituals, medieval rituals or Bali rituals, they address all the senses. And I think that's where a great potential lies for technology, to go further, to actually not only have, you know, multi-screen situations which we could never have experienced before, but also appeal to other senses, the sense of touch, also this possibility that all of a sudden, you know, complete different light conditions appear, that we can have, you know, a dark space go light, etc., etc. And of course, most importantly, the notion also of smell and olfactory dimension of exhibitions, you know, will become more possible to be programmed with you know, so I think it will allow us in the future more and more to have a kind of a Gesamtkunstwerk, you know, that idea of a Gesamtkunstwerk empowered by this possibility of, you know, a program, so that the exhibition, something for example Philippe Pareno works a lot with, you know, that the show, the exhibition becomes a program in that sense. To your second question about the use of all these social media in exhibition, I think it's absolutely wonderful, because it leads to a fact that, you know, exhibitions can disperse differently. It leads also that very often we have now actually photographs of exhibitions with people in, because it's actually really interesting if you look at the history, and it's something we discussed actually with Brian O'Doherty and Fishley Weiss when Peter Fishley, you know, did this book, and he asked me to go and see Brian Doherty and talk about exhibition photography in the White Cube. If you look at exhibition photography in the White Cube, it's mostly without people. It's always the artwork in an empty space, whilst actually a lot of the exhibition experience has to do, and again what Isaac describes, in these incredible multi-screen environments, we not only see a screen suddenly blend into another screen, but we see the other visitors and their shadows, you know, in this environment. And so that's something which, you know, through all these images posted on Instagram, all of a sudden we see many more people in exhibition photographs. If I think selfie sticks are a good idea in exhibition, probably not.
It is actually fascinating to look at when you're inside a museum or inside an exhibition, to see how everybody is going around taking snapshots. And so before you were writing a postcard from the exhibition and you were sending it out, and so you were advertising the exhibition by sending a postcard, and now you can do it immediately. But you have still some museums that resist it, and so the guards are not there to protect the artworks, they are there to prevent you from taking photographs. Then it becomes a sport to try, how can I get a snapshot while the guard is just distracted? And then your whole experience becomes dominated by trying to avoid the attention of the guard. And so it's fascinating how your museum experience as a visitor evolves as a result of all of that. Grimenessa, tell us your point of view on all of this.
Well, it is true, actually. In some places, like in Spain, they are very, very active with tweeting. So, I was blown away, because most of my installation work is actually interactive. I want the public to go through the lights and experience, and you know. So normally they're open, but in a project I did with the Ministry of Culture in Spain, I guess they are very active with tweeting, and the first week, they went over 7,000 people. So how they prepare, space that it was all tunnel, and not being, in risk of being sued by insurance and people falling and taking all the pictures with the guards. And so unfortunately, it brings the pros and cons like anything else in life, because I have to, and it's not the first time, somehow it had to be closed, because they wouldn't be allowed the installation to be massively open. And so it's a way to, that's one, in a country that I didn't have that feeling in the States, for example, right, with tweeting. Now, I gotta say that most of us, we are limited on our knowledge of technology by the companies that they want to sell certain amount of products, because I have the experience to work directly, especially with a lot of LEDs companies that they want me to work with them with their softwares. And so a lot of times they said, well, we are so many far advanced, why you keep on having that in the markets? And is that, listen, Grimanesa, we have certain amount of product, we have to finish them, and then we go to develop the next, even though we are 3 other steps over. So in a way, for the majority of all, where knowledge of technology somehow is limited by the corporations that they want to let us know at a certain point and not right after, right? So that's something to put.
Yes, I think what the two of you have in common as artists is that you create your art not thinking about how the market will respond to it. Your main purpose is to create great art, and it's not a thought that enters your mind of how the market will react to it. Do you find that Isaac? Do you find that the market has been very slow in responding to these new technologies?
Well, I think on one level, yes. But I think that could be a good thing, because I think one of the things, of course, in relationship to the market and the form and medium that one makes one work in, is that in a way you're freed to make the work to a certain extent, and I think that enables you to, in a way, freely express oneself in relationship to making works which are not in anticipation of the market as such. Although I think my last work, Playtime, was very much about the market to a certain extent. And dare I say that your performance in it, Simon, was a very central aspect in terms of, I think, trying to explore this question and to make it become part of an aesthetic experience as to why we appreciate art or not. So I think that's one aspect. And then the other thing I think as well is that just in relationship to the latter question around the role of looking, I'm rather envious of the way that people look with mobile phones, because I find it annoying, when I'm in an exhibition context or when people are looking at my work. I don't want them to look at my work with their mobile phone, but unfortunately I have no choice in it, because that's how people look now. And so this way of looking, I call it the distracted spectator. And now I think I'm in a new battle with the distracted spectator and how I can get them to become more enticed in the images that I'm making. Maybe it's a failed sort of battle to start with, but nonetheless, I think that is a kind of new terrain, because technology has so influenced the way that we look at art now.
Well, as a distracted spectator, I can tell you that your work looks great through an iPhone. What is interesting in your films, you pick still images, which then you produce as still images, and which is in a way the marketable part of the work. So people watching your films through an iPhone, in a way, compete with you, because they do their own still images.
They do, and that's wrong.
But then, Isaac, at the same time, when I went to see Playtime, there was no one did not spend, at least from the people who were in the room, who were in the space, no one left, and people stayed 15, 30 minutes. So you do actually, achieve what Margaret Mead says we should achieve, which is this idea that very often, if we just have an object, people spend a few seconds on average. I think even in front of the Mona Lisa, they spend less than 10 seconds. And so Margaret Mead says we need, new strategies, how actually, we can create situations where people spend more time in exhibitions. I think Playtime is a great success. People do spend time in Playtime.
No, Playtime is definitely a success, because my 4-year-old daughter, when she saw the 7-screen presentation, she thought, this is amazing. She was running between screen and screen, and she saw her silhouette appearing on the back of the other screens. And so it was an interactive participation in Playtime. Sorry, it was an unwanted intervention, but it just shows how inviting it all is. Anyway, I would like to really pass on now to questions. Any questions you may have from our 3 extraordinary and brilliant panelists, please feel free to ask them, and we'll take for 10 more minutes questions and try and answer them. Yes, madam.
Thank you. So I suppose the birth of social media and through technology is meant, as you mentioned, everyone can take their own pictures, and everyone in effect has access to a democratized kind of artistic I don't know, expression. So everyone else can sort of call themselves an artist in a way. How does that make you feel? And also, how does that affect the work that you create now? Because how do you use that to your advantage from a curator's perspective and from an artist?
Who would like to answer first this question?
I think in relation to how everybody can be an artist, that's not good. You know, it's the first answer to that. Not good. I'm being provocative. No.
And Jimeneza, do you share Isaac's view that it's not good?
Actually, I disagree. I think we are all artists in a way. We just use different ways of expressions. I mean, you know, some people, you know, it's you know, even to be a businessman, a good businessman, you have to be creative. So a good businessman could call himself an artist.
What is art then?
Well, it depends on each individual. You know, I cannot answer what is art. I could tell what it works for me, you know, or it has been working, but I cannot have a general idea of what is art.
What is art? Oh my God.
It's so broad.
I don't know. I mean, it's, yeah.
It feels as though everybody has a very clear definition of a technology, because everybody has such a strong opinion. Nobody seems to answer what art is.
Well, to me, the best definition of what art is still the one that Groucho Marx did, which is it stands for the abbreviation of ARSA. Sorry about that. Hans Ulrich, give us the answer.
It's a curatorial question.
Yeah, I mean, I want to answer your question from a curatorial point of view, but in terms of art, there are so many great definitions. Most recently, because we show his work at the Serpentine Galleries in London, I sort of read a lot again Leon Golub's writing, the late Leon Golub, the amazing artist and activist, and he always said art is an open gate to possibility, which I think is a great definition. But in terms of curating, I mean, it did change a lot, because when I became a curator, you know, decided that that's what I wanted to do, and I told my parents in the early 90s, you know, as a student, they were very reassured, because they thought I had gone into medicine, it's a medical profession. And Boltanski told me one should never clear up misunderstandings, so we left the misunderstanding and all was well. And now obviously, you know, that wouldn't happen in 2015, because the world is everywhere. And in a way, given the fact that we have this explosion, you know, of information, in this sense, indeed, in terms of information, everybody, you know, is a curator. But yet, at the same time, we should not forget that, you know, curating, in terms of exhibition making, is a very specialized profession. And the thing, what I think is so interesting now is that there is an amazing history of curating, not only by professional curators, also by artists. We should never forget that artists are also curators. Very often, artists are actually the best curators. They curate their own exhibitions, and they come actually up with amazing ideas of group show, which I very, very often, you know, co-curate my shows with artists. And if you think about this idea, you know, of it being a very specialized history, there is still a great amnesia about this exhibition history, because it doesn't produce objects, and mostly exhibitions are not collected. They're very often, you know, they disappear, and then there are a few photographs and maybe an archive. So at the moment when there is all this discussion about curating, I think it's incredibly urgent to make that history accessible. And again, you know, I don't think that memory is necessarily connected so much to information. It's not because we have more information that we have more memory. It might actually very well be that amnesia is very much at the core of this digital age. Hence, the necessity, I think, once more to protest against forgetting. And in a way, I think it's very useful now to really you know, make accessible the history of curating, look into these amazing pioneers which preceded us from previous generations, from the 70s, 60s back, you know, and in a way use this as a toolbox and make it more accessible. And as there is this great interest right now in the world of, you know, in curating, it's important, I think, to produce that knowledge and make it accessible and learn from it.
That's very interesting, what you say about the ephemeral aspect of a curator's work. If you had to recreate one single exhibition of the ones that of the many that you have curated, because I think of Harald Seemann's great exhibition When Attitudes Become Form, which is an extraordinary show that Germano Celant has recreated in Venice a couple of years ago. Which show would you wish to have recreated of the ones that you have done?
Yeah, I would never recreate one, a show of my own, but actually there is this plan now in Paris later this year with Chiara Parisi and La Monnaie, which is this new institution in Paris. She had this idea together with Christian Boltanski to recreate the Take Me I'm Yours exhibition, which is the first show I curated in London at a Serpentine in 1995 with Julia Peyton-Johns and the then curator Andrea Schlicker, and we basically did this exhibition where everything, was to be interacted with and people could actually take away the exhibits. It was a very, democratic exhibition. And now obviously it's interesting because redoing this exhibition doesn't mean to kind of restage it, because the times have changed and there are so many amazing artists who exactly now in the last couple of years have worked with that exactly topic. So it's going to be obviously a completely different show because it's going to be a mise à jour. So in this sense, I think, it's a process, so it can never be the same.
But I want to see one of your exhibitions. I vote for Cities on the Move. Cities on the Move. We'd like to see that exhibition again.
Good. Well, that's a strong vote. Now, one last question. Yes, please.
This question is for Hans Ulrich. The first image you showed is of the publication Do It, which Independent Curators International published again after 35 years. So for that publication, you must have seen great changes because of technology. So could you tell us a little bit about those changes?
Yes, very much so. I mean, when we did the Do It book with ICI in the 90s, in a way, the information and the access to information I had about instruction art was limited to, a few art centers in the world, mostly in Europe, in the US, a little bit in Asia, but it was very limited to few geographies. And 20 years later, the book is totally polyphonic because we had this possibility to research on all continents and actually saw that instruction art plays a role in so many different art scenes. So that's, one change. The other change is just simply that in a way, many of the instructions actually take into account technology. I think Namjoon Paik was the first artist who did a Do It piece in the 90s with technology. He sent his assistant to a then internet cafe, to do a piece. And Bruce Sterling did a piece about obsolete technology. But I mean, the interesting thing is at the end, it still all leads to a book. And I think books are incredibly important for art. And I think particularly, again, the art world in this sense leads, because I think at the moment when the book has to redefine itself, because what does it mean now to do books at the age of the, of digital technology, of the Kindle, where we just download a book, I think it becomes important that the book is actually as an object, something which matters. And artists have such an experience, and I've learned everything about books from artists to actually, and Lucy Lippert as a curator did early exhibitions where the catalog was as important as the show and helped to disseminate. And that leads me actually to a very urgent question for this panel on art and technology. Simon, if you allow me to ask one question to the two artists on the panel, I wanted to ask them both about their books. Because Isaac, I've just seen some of your recent books and wanted to ask what's the role of books in your practice in the digital age?
Well, I think I have Ellie here from my studio who might be a better person to ask, but all I can say is that making a book was a lot of hard work, and the Riot book, which I did recently, with the help of everybody in my studio, if I drove everybody mad in my studio making Riot, was published by MoMA, was a kind of tour de force, I would say, in terms of trying to talk about your work over the last 30 years. Not an experience I want to repeat anytime soon.
Jimeneza?
Well, books are obviously very important for all of us, but in my case, I have boxes and thousands of hundreds of books, and I just love the physicality of feeling surrounded by them. And I don't think that's going to be changing. I think it's going to be a very big audience all the time, very avid audience to keep on looking for books in different areas, of course, and obviously in technology. I get approached a lot by doing actually books online, magazines online, a lot. So, and also I got to say that in my case, you could understand always surrounded by power supplies and all this electrical hardware around me. And sometimes, I like to disconnect a little bit and go what Hans was talking about just writing. I have extensive notebooks that now I'm keeping, but before I used to fill them up and then just throw them out until my sister, you know, I realized that she started collecting them. And so I thought it was very interesting. So I do write, you know, I don't know in the case of Isa, but I write in the mornings and every night.
And Simon,
Well-
you're writing a book. Are these rumors true?
Oh, these rumors are true, but as I'm very, very bad, I am writing this book with somebody, you know, because I neither have the patience to read a book nor to write a book, but still want to write a book. Anyway, I would like to finish after this strong, we were here to speak about technology and it ends up in a strong endorsement of the physical book. But so I think what is good about this panel, it likes new school, it likes old school, and we just like to thank you all so much for your attention. And I would like to thank so much Hans-Ulrich Obris, Isaac Julian, and Grimanessa Amoros for sharing their insights into this world. And it reminds me of a song written by Thomas Dolby in the 80s. She blinded me with her science, and I think I have been blinded by your respective science today. And so thank you so much.